Hello, everyone. Today we have the lovely Ross with us. Ross has many
Hi.
years of experience behind her and a very interesting story. Can't wait to hear it. So, to start, Ross, tell us, when did you get diabetes?
I got diabetes in 2004 when I was 18 years old.
All right, so about 15 years ago?
Mhm. Yeah, coming up on 15, which is kind of crazy to say that. I don't know where the time has gone, but here I am with a 15-year anniversary coming up. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm actually about that same time span myself. I got about 8 years, about 15 to 16 years ago. But anyways, when you were first diagnosed, what would they tell you to do to
hmm
manage it?
Well, when I think back about it, I was really sick when I got diagnosed. Now, I don't know the American numbers for things. I don't know if you do the conversions, but when I got diagnosed, my blood sugars were 48. So that's about 10 times the level they're meant to be. I It's extremely high because we say the safe levels that we're meant to be between is between 4 and 8. I was 48. So I was extremely sick. And to be honest, I don't remember getting much of an education. I remember being in the hospital for a week because I was going into DKA. I was so unwell. I was very lucky to get caught when I did. But afterwards, I remember saying, "So, what do I do with this?" And they were sort of like, "Just you have to take injections for the rest of your life." And I remember being given a Milo. I don't know if you know what a Milo is, but it's like a chocolate drink. And I used to love Milo before. And I remember saying to them, I remembered the character from the Babysitters Club and knowing that she had diabetes and I don't think she was meant to eat sugar. And I said, "Am I not allowed Milo anymore?" And they said, "No, it's fine. It's fine." And I was like, okay, I don't really understand from here. But apart from that, I don't remember any like strong education, like these are the things you should eat or you shouldn't. Pretty much it was like, go and take injections for what you eat. And there wasn't a lot of other clear guidance around it at all. Basically, I went off on my Wild West ways from there and was just making it up as I went. Yeah.
So the classic eat whatever you want and take insulin for it kind of deal, huh?
Yeah, and actually, what happened is just a couple of years ago, my first cousin got diagnosed as well. So my brother got diabetes after me and my first cousin. Now, when my first cousin got diagnosed, I immediately started to call her and I said, "So, what have they told you about what diabetes means and what it is?" And she said, "Nothing. I just got told to take a shot of this amount." I said, "No one told you about even carbohydrate counting or anything?" She's like, "No." And I started to get really nervous about this because I was in the UK. She still lives in New Zealand. And I was thinking, no one's told you anything about what a high is, a low is. They basically said, just go start taking these shots. So I started working with her right away. And I said, "Look, let's try and figure some things out together." And I immediately said, "We've got to get the carbs out of your diet because we have no idea what's going on without the carbs." And I said, "I'm not going to tell you what to eat for the rest of your life, but please let's get carbs out of your diet at the beginning just to figure out what is happening with your basals and stuff." But I saw in that there was no, it was just not even just eat whatever you want, just go take shots and hope for the best. Like it didn't seem to have a lot more thought behind it. And I felt more nervous than she did, of course, because I was aware of what could happen on the other side when your shots go wrong. So yeah, absolutely eat whatever you want and take shots. But I think even more loose than that, more loose, which kind
Wow.
of freaks me out thinking back on it now when I think about it.
It's a pretty useless
Yeah.
doctor not giving you any advice at all. I mean, jeez. That's
Well,
like the Jesus
maybe they
take the
gave me
wheel approach right there.
it did feel like that looking back. Maybe there was more than I'm totally recollecting, but I know there was no conversations about carbohydrate counting even at that point. And I mean, I went down those roads and we'll come to talk about that. That didn't work out for me either. But I'm pretty sure I had diabetes about 10 years before I really got talked to about carbohydrate counting. So what I was doing in those 10 years, I don't really know. And when I think back about it, I just think, thank goodness everything was okay. Because that's scary to think how loose that was.
Well, perhaps those years were a bit of a blur, but do you remember how you were
Yeah,
feeling throughout that time?
I wasn't well. I wasn't well. And the reason I know too is I get to look back at my HbA1cs and see what they were. I didn't know what I was doing. I was having, when I first got diagnosed, I was having multiple lows a day. For many years after that, it was normal for me to have lows. My face would slump. I couldn't talk. I'd be falling on the person next to me. And then around that, I think my blood sugars were really, really high. And I wasn't testing very frequently. I didn't have a solid education at the beginning about what diabetes was. And I think I just kind of put it to the back of my mind, but no one seemed too concerned about that, to be honest. Not that I think that that's anyone's fault, but looking back at it, I think there are a lot of diabetics out there with no idea just the consequences that can happen when you don't have tighter control, but also how easy it is to get to tight control if you just have a bit of information. And that's a really hard thing looking back at the 10 plus years I spent living like that. And then it was still a few more years before I got to the point that I am now with low carbing, which is so much better than anything I was doing before.
Did you develop any complications before you went low carb?
No, I think I've been lucky. I have had some things start to happen, but it's hard to determine if they're directly related to type 1 diabetes. But the interesting thing is, after reading Dr. Bernstein's book, I realized that some of the things that I've got going on may be related to that, but it's hard to make a direct relationship. It may not be diabetes directly that has caused it, but it may contribute to the situation. I was really lucky not to have I didn't have incidences going into hospital. The only time I came close to DKA was when I was diagnosed, but I had really bad lows where I didn't know where I was. I had lows where I took all my clothes off in front of my family on Christmas Day because I was so low. And I walked out into the public space in front of everybody with no clothes on because I was so low. So I mean, I suffered those consequences, like when you don't have any control over your mind. And I've had lows where I was discovered I was in the ones, which you guys realize will be extremely low. And I wasn't able to look. Nothing happened because I was at home, but I was really close to not being in a good way. So the really big swings in my numbers.
Really big swings.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So very little control, essentially.
Yeah. I said I was a cowgirl. I mean, I didn't know what was up. If someone asked me, I would be like saying to someone who didn't have diabetes, oh, you take a shot to correct yourself, but ask me what my corrections were. I didn't know. I was just winging it. And with my meals, I think I guessed every meal was about 30 grams of carb. I think it was my my happy number always, 30 grams for the rice, 30 grams for the bread. No idea what was going on.
Wow. And how high were your blood sugars getting? Like, what was your A1C, would you say?
Well, the thing I know that happened is I got called into the doctor. One of my HbA1cs was so high, they called me in ahead of my normal appointment and they said, you need to go on a pump. You really need to look at this, because I remember on the scale, it has the green and the yellow and the red, and I was in the red. So I think my HbA1c at that point in 2013, it must have been around, I think around 13%, something like that. Before that, the thing is, I actually in general had quite good HbA1cs. My HbA1cs sat, I think, between the 6s, 7s, and 8%. But that's because I had so many lows. They were balancing out the crazy highs. So it was not a reliable result for how well my blood sugars were. The control was all over the place and there was no stability. So if you looked at the standard deviation, I'm sure it was enormous. So the HbA1c was not a very good measurement. But yeah, by the time they called me into the hospital to talk about it, they were really concerned about where my diabetes was heading.
Okay, and that was about 2013?
That was 2013, yep.
And did you get better control after you got on a pump?
I did get some better control. My HbA1c got a bit better, but actually what the pump started to do for me was open up my understanding of diabetes. To go on a pump, of course, you have to do a training course to learn the ins and outs of it. And by going through that, that was one of the first times that I realized that I was missing a lot of information. And I started to get really nervous. And I realized how many years I started to look back at the years before and go, oh my gosh, I never had close calls in that, like I didn't collapse or something, but it dawned on me just how lucky I had been that nothing had happened. And I started to realize that with this information, things got a lot easier. And I thought, I want to know more about this. I like being able to feel in control. And it started my journey of starting to look into my diabetes on my own and not just go into appointments and say, is everything okay? And then they would say, yeah, it's fine, because my HbA1c was pretty good by the measurements that they give. And I go, okay, fine. Whereas this time, for the first time, I was like, the results are not reflective of my situation, and there's a lot more I can learn about this.
It's basically you got the crash course you should have gotten when you were first diagnosed.
Yeah, if I'd known just the risks that could be involved, I, 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 I I feel really nervous when I think back about those years that have already passed. I just can't believe how clueless I was, and not by not wanting to pay attention. I didn't understand.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when did you discover low carb?
So I got my pump in 2013, and things got a lot better to get more stable. And I started to learn about dawn phenomenon and all these wonderful things I discovered. And then in about 2015, I don't know how I came across the book, but I had gotten pretty obsessive with learning about diabetes. I was Googling things a lot. I was trying to understand what things meant. I was starting to exercise quite consistently, and I wanted to understand how I could make that work because I was finding it really difficult. And then somehow I came across someone talking about Dr. Bernstein's book, and I bought it and I read it, and I I think after reading that, I almost went through a little period of mourning or something where I felt like I was waking up to something. I was so confused about how confusing it had been before. And I started to see a way out of the old way I had been. So I started low carbing in 2015, and the results were immediate with the control that I had. My insulin requirements dropped enormously, and I just couldn't believe how simple it was. I stumbled through low carbing in 2015. I started, but I didn't manage to like fully commit to it. I was still eating breads and things every once in a while, and it would just send my blood sugars in a crazy direction, and it'd be really hard to get them back. But little by little, I just carried on doing more of it, and I've been really, really strong with it pretty much since 2000 and maybe late 2015. It's been something that I've just really, really embraced. It wasn't a thing that I was fighting. It was more just that I thought I could get away with like having carbs, and then they would kick me in the butt, and I'd be like, oh yeah, like it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Like if I tried to have some bread, I was like, nah, I hate that feeling.
I've always thought that one reason that it's kind of it seems easier for me to go low carb myself and focus on type 1 diabetics because we are the only ones that really feel it when you cheat.
Yeah.
Like anyone else,
Yeah.
you might feel a little groggy afterwards, you might have some stomach pains, but nothing nearly like the rush of sugar that comes in after a cheat meal for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So,
And just the hassle of what you deal with after. If I eat some bread, your blood sugars go up, but they do not come down in this linear way at all. Like they might come down, and then the next day you feel really resistant to everything, and your blood sugars are like really hard to get back under control. You're just thinking about it a lot more. You're checking them, and they're going up and down. They're more reactive for a couple of days. Like I notice if I eat something while I'm low carbing, it might not nudge my blood sugars, but if I eat the same thing after I've like eaten some bread or something, it just spikes, and I hate it. I like being able to wake up and not be like, oh, am I stable or am I 14? Like, am I going to have to think about this? Am I going to have to take corrections for the whole day? Is my anxiety going to go up about things going wrong? Am I going to be able to exercise? Just all the layer of things that unfold with it. It's such a relief to wake up and blood sugars not be the first thought of my day because I know that they're under control. If they're not under control, I know I can pinpoint probably why it happened and then get it under control again.
good, good. And speaking of which, how are you feeling before versus how you're feeling now, as far as that goes?
Well, before, I have to say, it wasn't like I constantly felt sick all the time because I had blood sugars going high a lot. The difference is now I notice more quickly if I'm unwell, but it's more I think the greatest relief that I've felt has been just that sense of not worrying so much, knowing that like when I get up nowadays, my blood sugars are in a stable line all day. And I know when I'm going to eat, they're going to budge a tiny bit, and I know what to take to get them under control. If something happens and they go a bit higher, I know the correct correction to take, because low carb allows you to work out all of these different dosages correctly. It just takes away the anxiety and the frustration. The thing that I've noticed that has really disappeared is the frustration of, why is it not working? Why, when I'm doing all these things and my blood sugar's high, I don't have those conversations anymore, because I don't have to battle with that confusion of why it must be high or low. So the biggest thing that I've noticed with like low carb is not the physical sensation. That has happened, but I've kind of forgotten about that. It's the lack of frustration with diabetes. Diabetes feels more like this thing in the background that is trucking along and I take care of, and I actually really enjoy having now, because it's taught me so much about my body, about how my body works, about how to be healthy. It helps me embrace a healthy lifestyle really willingly, and I'm really appreciative for that. But it's not this thing that is this drag that is driving me crazy and making me feel frustrated. It's my pal in a way. Like, it tells me if something's going on with my body, instead of the other way around of me trying to figure out what's going on with it. It actually gives me information if I'm getting sick or if I'm stressed. It tells me, because my blood sugars will be high. But it's not in a way that I'm really frustrated about how I'm going to get out of the cycle of high blood sugars. So it's a really surprising twist, because it drove me crazy for so many years. But it's working really nicely.
Yeah, it's so ironic because people always wave it off like, oh, it's too hard. You can't cut up bread. It's too
Yeah.
hard. No, this is actually way easier to manage. Every other way
Yeah.
is a pain in the ass. You know,
Yeah.
it's so much better that way.
Yeah.
And oh, this is where the really interesting story comes in. You're going to love this, guys. So let's get into the whole Daphne thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
What happened there?
So do you know the Daphne chorus?
No, I pretend like I
Okay.
don't.
Okay. So Daphne is a really, really great course that they run here in the UK and in New Zealand and Australia. I think it's like amongst the Commonwealth countries. And it's a course that I really admire for the way that it was set up, because the idea was, when they brought it in, they didn't want people to be ruled by eating times and things like this, because once upon a time, obviously, when people took shots, they had to take them at a certain time of day and time it with a certain amount of food and blah, blah, blah. And I think the idea behind it was that that seemed very restrictive and made boxed diabetics in. And so the philosophy behind Daphne is that you eat whatever you want, and you shoot for it. You make diabetes work around your life. And so it's about finding techniques to make that work. However, I have found from experience of trying to live that way that didn't actually really work out for me. When I was trying to live that you just shoot for whatever you eat, I still couldn't get the stability that I wanted with my diabetes, and it still really ruled my life. So just last week I was on a Daphne course, which was a really great experience to go to. But the thing is, I found that when I got to it, so much of the material just didn't feel relevant to me, because a huge part of it is carb counting. And the idea behind it is that you learn to count carbs accurately so that you can take appropriate shots. But something that really occurred to me, even as we were doing the course, I went through all the parts and I was counting the carbs, but I couldn't guess the carbs. Like, I wasn't shooting for them or eating the stuff. We had, plastic foods and stuff that we were playing with. But you'd pick up a piece of a plastic bit of rice, and someone would be like, I think it's 45 grams. Someone's like, I think it's 65. No, it's 85. And you just see, you just see in that process the impossibility of trying to eat with so many carbs, because it doesn't matter how well trained you are in something. It's so impossible to guess how many carbs are in something. And then on top of that, you can't determine how much a manufacturer has put into a product. You can't ensure that that's always accurate. And I was just in there going through the process thinking, this is just craziness to me, because even the way that we are guessing off by 20 grams of carb between us just shows what a margin of error there is. And carbs obviously rise your blood sugars the most quickly over anything else. you can just see in that situation how you're setting yourself up to fail. Now, I was the only low carber in there, and I openly said to everyone, I low carb and also I fast. So these are two things that I do regularly, and I regularly go into ketosis, and this is the way that I live. And at the end of each day, we had to show our diaries. We were filling out diaries and how our blood sugars were going so we could problem solve with each other. And my other classmates were putting theirs up, and we were trying to find patterns of what was going on. But of course, it was very confusing because they're all eating carbs. So it's quite hard to pinpoint like where the things are not working. Is it your carb ratio? Is it your correction factor? Is it your basal insulin? When you look at it, you just don't know where to start. But I was the only low carber, and through the week, my blood sugars were stable all week. I think the highest I got was about an 8 or a 9, and I could see that it was because I had overloaded on protein and also wasn't moving as much, so I needed to put my temp basal up. But all through the week, I was stable, like a straight line going through the middle. But I just think that's still the way people frame it. No one was saying this against me, but I feel like there's this thought that what she does, I couldn't do. It would be too hard. And it's interesting because the way I frame it is for me, like I'm not judging any diabetics that decide to eat differently, because I think you have to decide for yourself. It's your experience and that you're going through. But it's just interesting when I hear people look at my diet and think that looks restrictive, that looks difficult, that looks like too hard. But I look at that situation and I see freedom. I see freedom from worry. I see liberation. I see control. I see all these other things from it that other people are not necessarily seeing if they haven't tried it. But when once I've gotten into it, I could never go back to that old way. I couldn't live with that chaos and the fret about what's going to happen in the background of all of it. What's going to happen to my eyes? What's going to happen to my limbs? What's going to happen to my heart? I don't want to live with that worry. I can't guarantee nothing will happen, but I don't want to live panicking that it's going to happen because I know I've got high blood sugars.
Just like we were saying before, they're worried about it being hard, but again, it's actually so much easier to manage this way. Stupid easier.
Yeah, but it takes a bit of trial. And I think the thing that I find difficult is that through my diabetes journey, no one ever presented this to me as an option. The only reason I found any of this out was because I started to look into things on my own. So in 2013, 14, when I started to research stuff, that's how I started to open myself up to find solutions. Before that, when I followed the guidelines that I was given, it wasn't working for me, but it was never presented as a possibility, an option, something I could look into, that it could provide control. And maybe it doesn't work for every single person. Maybe there are some people who don't, just adapting their diet like this is not going to work. And, they've every right to do what they want to with their own bodies. But I wish that I had access to this information sooner, because no one mentioned Dr. Bernstein's book to me. The fact that he is a type 1 diabetic and has dedicated his life to studying this seems like a pretty valid point, as a great resource to look into the information that he has. So much of what he was saying when I read his book resonated more with me and made sense. That's why this happens. That's why that feels really confusing. That's why that doesn't feel like a smart idea to do that. And I was wondering why it didn't work, But I wish someone was saying, maybe this is something you want to try. Low carbing is something that works for some people. Cutting the carbs out of your diet can be a really effective way to get control of your diabetes if you want to give it a go. But it was never put out like that, that's the thing I find frustrating now, that this information is not made available to people as an option, because I hear in doctors that they say that would be too hard, that would be too restrictive, it's too difficult to manage. But that comes from an opinion someone has. It doesn't come from lots of clinical trials looking at this. It doesn't come from talking to diabetics who live the experience themselves. And so I find it frustrating when I realize a lot of that perspective is based on a presumption of someone who doesn't have diabetes, who is not looking at trials, because I don't think there are a lot of trials around about this, rather than listening to a diabetic who is saying, this really works for me. And it's a great thing to offer to people as something to try if they want to try it too. And could we run courses that show people how to do it if they want to try it?
Yes, and that's kind of why I'm making this whole series, is because, nothing nothing makes more sense than to actually get in the stories from actual people doing it. You can talk to a
Yeah.
doctor all you want, and oh, they have book smarts, but they don't live with this disease. They don't know what it's
Mm.
really like in the
Yeah.
end. So that opens them up for error, and unfortunately, there's a whole lot of error there
Yeah.
for most of them. So fantastic that you're able to find this approach. And
Mm.
one thing that even people in our circle find controversial that I'd love for you to go into is the fasting. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Sure. I would love to talk about fasting because when I started fasting, I couldn't find any information on this for a type 1 diabetic. So fasting came about for me because I was looking into more information and I just got really interested in this ketosis idea and what it could do for the body and how it could renew the cells and help your blood sugar control. And I thought, I really want to try this. And I also was reading a lot by Dr. Jason Fung, who is based in Toronto in Canada. And he is using fasting to cure type 2 diabetes. Yes, cure type 2 diabetes. Because what he points out is that diabetes type 2 is a metabolic disease. So what I've come to understand from reading more of his work is that there seems to be some confusion by people about what it is that causes type 2 diabetes. And I understand now that it's about having an overload of sugar in the cells. And the reason that insulin can't work so well is because it's overloaded in sugar. And you actually need to remove the sugar in order to get the insulin working. If you go and put insulin on top of it, you're just making the situation worse. So he's been using fasting for a number of years now, about 5 years in his clinic. And he's having amazing results, people who have non-diabetic levels anymore. And I was reading this and I thought, well, I wonder what it would be like as a type 1 diabetic. What would happen if I did fasting? But I could only find a couple of blog posts about it from a couple of type 1s. And I started to experiment with myself because once I got into getting this information, I just got more and more intrigued with figuring things out on my own. And I started to practice fasting. I had amazing results from this. You have to be very careful with this. This is not the type of thing I would recommend someone tries to do without doing thorough research. I would say talk to your healthcare professional, but I also understand with type 1s that many of the times we find useful information on our own. I would say go and consult a bunch of type 1s on Reddit or something, find out what other people are doing and find out all of the things you need to know about, and find if you can find a doctor or a dietitian that works with fasting. I have a dietitian that works with fasting and low-carb high-fat, and it's working out really well for me. It's really, really important. So what I did is I started to practice not eating and see what would happen. And it's that same thing that you would imagine that it would be really difficult. That sounds really unpleasant, horrible. I couldn't do that, blah, blah, blah. Everything has gone the other way. It's been a fantastic experience. I have found that I really enjoy my fasts. I do them regularly now, at least one a week. And I'm starting to practice with doing them a bit more regularly to change it up. When I fast, I have to drop all of my basal rates and all of my bolus rates for the period that I'm fasting. And I know the process that it happens at. I'll see my blood sugar start to drop, then I drop all my rates. And for the next days after, while I'm in ketosis, my blood sugars are in a beautiful straight line and they barely even budge. They just cruise along like this. And what I found has been really interesting is whenever I fast, it's like it resets all of my body. So there might be a period that my basal rates start to go like this a little bit and they might get a little bit more like reactive to stuff. If I fast, it's like it resets the whole thing and it gets back that really strong reaction to everything. And it just goes this, all the insulin is able to work better in my body again. And it's really exciting whenever it happens because I'm taking the same amounts, but I can see that it can be more efficient. And being in ketosis, not ketoacidosis, ketosis, it's a very important distinction to make, is really, really helpful for my diabetes. I find that it forms it's like a protective barrier against the highs and the lows. Obviously, it's so important to be really, really aware of the dangers of ketoacidosis, to be aware of how you need to control your blood sugars and make sure that they're safe. If I ever found myself going into high blood sugars, I would stop right away. It's not something to mess with, and it's not a joke for type 1 diabetics. I have to be really clear if anyone's listening to this that it's something you must be very careful about and get all of your information before you try anything like this before. But yeah, it's something that I thoroughly enjoy to do, and I know I get a lot of concern from doctors. I try and openly say that I do it. I said it in the Daphne course that I was in ketosis because they were talking about ketones and how dangerous they are. And I think there's a bit of cross information going on about it, because I put my hand up and said, I'm in ketosis right now, because I was. I said I do this regularly on a weekly basis. And I think people think ketones, diabetics, dangerous right away. It is dangerous if it's in the wrong circumstances, but actually humans make ketones all the time, not only if you're in ketosis. If you're burning fat, it's really common to make ketones as well. And to make it into this thing for type 1 diabetics that they should always be afraid of it is not really the full picture of what's going on there, because I've been doing this since 2015. And it's, if you've got stable blood sugars and you're watching over what's going on, you have ketones. Like my ketones will go up to 3 sometimes, as high as that. And I'm perfectly safe and stable, and I know it. And I think, again, it's sending a message that is not the entire truth, not the truth of the situation to type 1s, that they should always be afraid of ketones, because there's kind of quite a few different body dynamics that are going on there.
I once heard a you can compare it between different storms. Like ketosis is like a very light drizzle, waters the flowers, makes everything happy in nature, while ketoacidosis is like a Category 5 hurricane. You know, pretty different, you'd say.
Yeah. And it's not a joke. It is not a joke. Like I don't want anyone to get the impression I'm saying this if it's not serious. It is serious, but it's a very, very different condition from being in ketosis.
So let's dive deeper into this fasting thing. What exactly is your approach? You mentioned that you start a fast and you lower your basal. Can you tell us more about how you do it?
Yeah, sure. So normally the first day is not going to do a lot. So 24 hours is kind of like a really light fast. But I try and do that on a weekly basis just to keep my sensitivity up. I find it's just as effective as really intense exercise, more effective actually. Like the days after I end a fast, I just react to everything better. So typically what I do is I'd have a dinner, and then I might skip all of my meals and any drinks full of anything until the next dinner, and that would be a 24-hour fast. But the magic really happens when I can extend it. So what I've been practicing at the moment is eating a dinner, waiting till the next dinner, and then going into another day where I will skip my meals all day and go to a dinner. And that's when it gets really, really deep, the ketosis, and my numbers will go up. And that's when I see the blood sugars. It's like they'll go like this, and then suddenly they go boom, like this. And they just stay in this straight line where they're kind of being held, it seems. And I have to be careful what I eat so I don't knock myself out, but pretty much it's not going to swing anywhere. And it's amazing to watch it happen. And by then I'll drop all my basals down. I'd be dropping them by a third. And for the next days, my sensitivity is so high that I just don't have to take the same amounts. I might drop my my boluses as well, and all my insulin usage in general goes right down. And I'm really full, feeling really energized, and I wait to another day to break the fast. So right now what I'm practicing is I'm really enjoying eating in the evening. So I'm playing with doing 20 hours of fasting and 4 hours of eating. So I might eat 2 small meals, and it's working out pretty nice so far. And I'm just going to see how long I keep doing that for. Because there's a point I'll eat, there's times that I up my meals as well. But at the moment, like I've got a couple of pounds I can lose. So it's okay to play with it. But then there's a point that you don't want to keep losing be losing lots of weight. So you might up your meals as well.
So it's not the Mahatma Gandhi kind of fast. It's more like an intermittent kind of fasting where you go 1 meal a day kind of style.
Yeah, exactly. But I have done, the longest fast I did was 4 days.
Okay.
I did that once. That was a few years ago, and I was experimenting and very into it. I haven't really wanted to do that lately. I really enjoyed the way I'm eating. I like eating a lot less. I like eating higher fat meals and just not eating all the time. It's funny because people, when they're living off carby diets as well, I think they assume that it will be this torture, and it just couldn't be more different. I love food. I love cooking for people. I'm a real foodie, but I also really enjoy my fasts, and I really enjoy the benefits I get from them. And I enjoy having really low carb meals and eating so much less as well. It's not this torture that people imagine at all. It's the easiest thing.
I imagine it'd be harder for someone on a high carb diet just because of the way you're running on sugar, and it doesn't last as long as fat does. It just burns a lot. It's a lot easier to do. So I think it goes naturally with the low
Definitely.
carb approach. And
Yeah.
as you said, it helps lower your or raise, I guess, your insulin sensitivity for a while.
Yeah, yeah. For days after, I'll just have this. Like my basal rates might be, I'm taking about 15 units a day right now, much lower than what I used to take when I ate carbs. And when I'm fasting, I might go down to 12, and I'm like, what? It's crazy. And then for the days after, it'll probably sit there, and then I might see they start to creep up, and it's time to pop them up again. But it just seems this amazing reset for diabetes. Like if I was having trouble of them bouncing a whole lot in the morning, I do the fast, and the days after all that stuff's gone, the dawn phenomenon calms down because the insulin is able to serve it better. I don't know. I could eat starchier meals and be controlled better for a few days after. I don't go back to lots of carbs, but I could eat something with some more starches, and it's probably going to hold it okay. And it doesn't really bounce out of it. It's pretty
That's
incredible.
fantastic. We might we,
Yeah.
we might have to work together sometime, make a guide for that kind of thing, because nothing like that exists at the moment. So, I mean, given
No.
your unique experience, it might be good to do that. But moving on from that, I definitely do more research, give it a try if you like, but do more research first. Moving on from that, though, tell us what kind of foods are you eating now?
Yeah, sure. I love my food. I live off zucchinis. Do you call them
Yes,
that? We call them
yes,
zucchinis. Zucchinis. Aubergine, or we say eggplant as
eggplant.
well. I don't know if you
It's
say that.
eggplant. Yep.
Okay, so zucchinis and eggplant and broccoli. I eat a lot of salads. I'm called the queen of salads, but my salads are not like those puny little light things that people think a side salad is. Like my salad is a big deal. So I love to make big bowls of them, and I'll put avocado, tomatoes. I still eat cheese. I eat nuts. I eat lots of fish. So I love salmon and sardines. They're my two favorites. I do eat things like chicken as well, but I don't tend to eat a lot of it. I've actually quite liked not eating meat all the time. So I know people who follow ketogenic kind of diets tend to like eat lots of heavy meats and creams and stuff. And I just found that too heavy. So I actually run a little bit higher on the starchy side. Dr. Bernstein says 12 grams. I probably have more like 15 to 18 grams of carbs. That's what I like to do. But I guess I kind of balance it out a bit with my fasting as well. But I prefer to have some more vegetables in my diet, but I use lots of light things like this. I eat tons of olives. What other things do I eat? I eat dark chocolate, not a lot of it, but I love to like have a couple of squares, and I really savor it. I still have coffee. I have almond milk. I have soy milk. I have tofu. Um, yeah, tons of things like this. When I eat out, I am a bit more flexible with some stuff, and I might order things that have more starches, not never potatoes and stuff like that, but maybe peas and things like that. And I might just be careful about how much I have, and that's like my flexibility there. I'm really happy with it. I never feel like I'm missing out on something, and I actually have lots of friends who kind of have started to adapt my diet, and we all quite frequently order this way when we're out. Like I make a great cauliflower pizza and an almond flour pizza, and I love making pizza that way. It tastes so much better than regular pizza. And I still host lots of dinner parties and love to cook for people. So I do like the zucchini noodles and the cauliflower rice and stuff like that. And everybody always thinks it's really delicious. I'm like, yeah, it is, because it's all real food. It is really delicious.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that fathead dough, the almond flour pizza. It's one of my it's the most
Yeah,
convincing one.
so
It's
good.
the kind of one you can make and people will actually be like, "Oh, this is a good pizza. It doesn't taste
Yeah,
like trash." Wow. You're like, "Yeah, I did
yeah. And
it."
it tastes so, cauliflower pizzas are amazing. They take so long to make, but it is divine. And people always say so. I'm like, I know, because the vegetables give it such a richness. It's just a shame how long it takes, but I savor that stuff. It's so amazing.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I believe that about fleshes it out. If you were, we've kind of already went over this already, but if you could go back to when you first started, what would you have told yourself back then?
Oh man, I wish I could have told myself just educate yourself. educate yourself. That's been the most empowering thing out of anything. When I've realized that I can take charge of knowing my diabetes, all of the things that have solved my problems have all come from my own education. None of it has come from the doctors. Not to say that the doctors weren't trying to help me. They're all doing the best that they can. And I think it's really important not to get into this thing of like demonizing medical professionals, which I kind of see going on a little bit sometimes in the way people talk about it in the low carb forums and stuff. And I don't actually find that helpful to anybody, because look, people are doing the best that they can. And when you receive an education at school and you're told this is what you should educate people to do, it makes sense that you go and pass it on. And that actually comes from a really loving place of wanting people to be well. The problem is that we're forgetting the beginner's mind here. And the thing that really resonated me about Dr. Bernstein is that he was a type 1 talking about type 1 diabetes. And the way he was talking about things made sense with why certain things were not adding up to get results, but why doctors would be recommending them. But I don't think it helps to go, oh, like these people, I've seen people sort of like criticize people for being dumb or something. I don't think that's the case. I think that all of us, if we can have more of a beginner's mind, we can see more. And that's really important in this process, I think. That healthcare professionals could go back to having a beginner's mind and going, maybe not all the things that I've learned in school are actually the things that are helpful, or maybe there's another way to do this and this could be okay, like low carbing, or maybe it's possible for someone to really enjoy eating this way and it's actually okay to restrict carbs, and it's not a thing that is like robbing them of something, because I don't miss bread and pizza for the freedom that I've been given from my struggles. But yeah, I think I would say to myself, if I did it again, to educate yourself, because to all type 1s out there, if you're struggling with anything, the sooner you can get more information and find out, understand as much as your doctor does, the better you can serve your diabetes. Because now when I go into meetings, I know if someone's giving me information against low carbing, usually I already can pinpoint what belief they have and where they've probably learned that from, because I've read about it and learned about where they might have learned that. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to listen to that opinion for this reason. I know that that's, based on this theory that I know is not working for me or is not true. And that's been really empowering. So I can navigate my own diabetes care a lot better. And I mean, the results say it all. Just like the control they have is crazy. I never thought I could live with this freedom. And with my life, what's so amazing is I work a really, really full-on job. I travel around the world. I've been to India. I go to Thailand every year. I go to the Philippines. I do work there. I run big productions. And diabetes is not holding me back from doing any of these things, because I have the experience and the knowledge that I need to be able to navigate these situations. So my diet choice has enhanced my life and given me more freedom than anything I was able to have before. And my life is richer because of it. So if anyone is out there considering low carb, I highly recommend that you get Dr. Bernstein's book and start your own journey to educate yourself, because you can do such amazing things for your disease with your own knowledge. You don't have to wait for a doctor to approve all those things. Experiment on yourself, and you start to go, let me try out these theories and whether this actually works, and you start to get the results yourself.
It's fantastic. It's a lovely message. And what is your A1C now compared to back then? You said it was at its highest peak around 13 or so. What's your A1C now?
I don't know what it is currently. It's I don't stress about it too much, which is an amazing thing. Do you do the double numbers instead of the percentage?
We do like a good A1C is 4.8 to 5 for us.
4.8, did you say? We do, okay, I think I know what that is, but we do a double number, and we do like a 42. Well, 42 is like a low 6.
I'll work on the conversions later. Just tell you what it is right now. What do you think?
My current one is going to be the low 40s, and that's quite high for me. I want to get this down. So what I'm aiming for this year is I hope to have my first non-diabetic H1C. And whenever I go into doctor's offices, they're a bit like, go easy on yourself, blah, blah, blah. But I think this year I'm going to achieve it. But my A1Cs have been insane. They've been at the bottom of the scale that says the diabetic safe ones. But I think this year I will be able to get my first non-diabetic, which just blows my mind to say that. And I think it will be coming up pretty soon, looking at my latest numbers. But I'm trying not to dwell on it too much. I'm just trying to focus on the day to day and how I'm feeling in it, and not get too much caught up in like a have to have and be there. The great thing is I know as far as diabetic scales go, I'm in the complete clear as far as what they say is good. And yeah, to be getting there will just be a bonus. But it looks like I've finally been cracking all the different things I need to have to come together. And once I get there, I'm sure it will continue to be at that kind of level, because there's always like little bits of information that are missing, and then you crack them and everything flows together. So that's pretty amazing.
Yes, it's a completely complicated puzzle, but once you solve it, you can finally get there. That's fantastic. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. Just I just hope if there's anything I've said in here that might have like opened up someone's mind, they can always reach out to me as well. I'm always happy to talk to type 1 diabetics about type 1 diabetes. But if anyone out there is feeling a bit nervous about trying low carb, or feeling like that feels like too much or something, when I first read Dr. Bernstein's list, I had that feeling of, oh, this is too restrictive, this is too much. You can ease into it. Some people say just jump all in, but I found it a bit easier to like hold on to some vegetables like carrots and things. I got rid of the white carbs. I would say get rid of them right away. They're not going to do anything good for you. That if you're struggling to go the full way, you can ease in a little bit and hold on to some of those things, but just take the leap as soon as you can, because it's the idea that it will be difficult that is a lot more difficult than the actual process. I found it's always been manageable, and like I said, I've been traveling around India and stuff and still made it work. It is possible.
Fantastic. Well, we'll end it at that. Thank you so much for giving us your story today. It was very interesting, very inspiring, and hopefully a lot of people see this and it resonates with them.